Welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast, where we break down the practical applications of this emerging science, starting with healthy light habits and going wherever the quantum superhighway takes us. I'm your host, Meredith Oke, with a quick announcement that registration is open for the next practitioner certification cohort. You can find the link at www.quantumbiologycollective.org. Or if you're not a practitioner but are looking for one, you can find the directory there as well. Hello, so good to have you here, Nicole. We are here today with Nicole Hartman of Circadian Family Wellness. And so, Nicole, you now work with families and host a podcast to help people sort of understand some really important basics to healthy living as regards to light, which so many of us don't understand. But you started this journey to help your own family and particularly your son. Could you sort of just tell us about your family and what drew you to find a quantum health practitioner?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, it's been a journey, that's for sure. I'll start and say that, my husband and I have always been in this kind of, health and wellness realm. We were both physical education teachers. And so we had a pretty good grasp on the human body and, especially through movement. And then when we had our son, he was born with Down syndrome, which we didn't know about. It's like, surprise. And,
Wow.
And so, that kind of opened up a whole other set of doors for us. Some positive, some negative. And it's kind of like, I can remember our pediatrician at the time saying, don't look up anything. Don't look up anything for Down syndrome. She goes, it's not good. And we definitely kind of heeded that advice. And because it's really daunting, just kind of like all the negative sides to it and everything. So, he was, he was such a perfect baby and just developed actually really typically. And it wasn't until probably about 18 months then that things started to kind of go downhill. And without saying too much, it's like you have that well child starter pack, if you will,
Yeah.
You show up for all of those things and things happen and he's on, antibiotics all the time and steroids. And then by the time right around 3, he started with his first autoimmune disease. And he started with his thyroid issue first because he started losing some hair.
Okay. So just for those of us who don't know anything about having a Down syndrome child, so is that very common for them to run into not only the effects of being Down syndrome, but also to run into a whole bunch of other health effects like autoimmune diseases and things like that?
It is. And I would say that maybe I don't even want to say that they have a higher chance of getting sick more often, because knowing what I've learned now, that doesn't have to be the case. And so I think that kind of is like the driving factor of that we can make changes and not maintain the status quo of these issues. And so you do see a certain set of autoimmune diseases that are pretty prevalent in people with Down syndrome. But the goal is to kind of maybe get to it so it doesn't have to happen, when they're younger.
Yes.
And
you have other children as well, right?
I have 4 girls too. So we have 5 total.
5 total. Okay. And where in the birth order is your Down syndrome child?
He's our oldest. So he was our.
So this was your initiation into parenthood.
Absolutely. Wow. I know.
And all right.
Every time they have a birthday or he has a birthday, you're like, just, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of a happy day for moms and dads as well.
Yeah.
You kind of have that remembering and, it takes you back to that day and it's like, here's our baby. And, he doesn't have really profound features of a person, like a typical person with Down syndrome would. It turns out he actually has really high muscle tone. So that kind of helps him. But it was just we noticed that his one eye was kind of crossed. And then we noticed that there's a line on the palm of their hands that can kind of be indicative of Down syndrome. Okay. And so they ran a test. And then, a couple of days later, you get the news and it's like, I just had a baby and here's this news. And you're
wow. So you found out after he was born.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So the birth was all great. You have this beautiful little baby.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
Oh, and there's this. Okay.
Yeah. And in hindsight, those were some tough days, like mentally tough times. Yeah. And it's just amazing what time does, time and then just choosing to just love your child because he's your child, he's this beautiful gift. And he is amazing, just like the rest of our children. So that's that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So you have your son, your doctor's like, don't go down the rabbit hole. It's a scary rabbit hole. So what was the kind of advice or the stage that was set for you by your trusted healthcare advisors? Like, what did they say?
Well, the advice was, their immune systems aren't as strong. That was like the first thing. And, I'm sure as a mom, it's like you have these gut feelings of like, that just doesn't sound right. Like he's like,
that's just it. Yeah. His immune system's not good. And that's the end of the story.
And so you need all of this stuff, to help him to be fine. And of course, with that came like early intervention services and stuff like that, getting him to be able to physically develop at as much of a typical rate. And it turns out that he just did things when he was ready to do things. And, and it's like knowing what I know now and what I was able to kind of impress upon then, with our subsequent children, it's like, they just do what they want anyway, when they want to. And I can remember one time they were trying to get him to walk or to stand, independently. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, whatever. And so as soon as they left, then the kid stands up in the middle of the room and is like, I can do it. Like, I'm just going to do it when I want to do it, and that is totally his personality to this day. It's like, I can't force anything on that child. So.
And how old is he now?
He's 14, about to be 15.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So I can't believe it. I mean, I'm just like 20 years old. So,
Yeah. I know. It's like, how do we have teenagers?
We're
only 25.
Right. This doesn't make sense.
Okay. So in his early years, you were sort of just, following the standard course of treatment.
Yep.
And how did that go?
It wasn't great. We found ourselves, he was sick it seemed like every month we were making a visit in, a round of antibiotics and stuff like that. And I think what you find too is that gut health amongst people with Down syndrome is extremely sensitive, just like the rest of their body is extremely sensitive to any light, any chemical, anything that's creating chaos, because it almost seems like there's chaos in the body to begin with, which you would probably attribute to like poor mitochondrial function. Is where I would go with it.
Interesting.
It is really interesting in how the sequence of events it leads you to the now. And I think that is something to remember when you're on this health journey.
Yes.
Is that we have to remember from where we came to where we are now, because you wouldn't be where you are now. And that's a challenge to accept, when you're dealing with sickness or someone that just isn't well. And so then by the time he was 3, thyroid, Hashimoto's isn't common in people with Down syndrome, but hypothyroidism is.
Okay. So tell us what that looks like, how that presented, what you were.
For him, it was just, he started losing like a little bit of hair. His hair was thinning. And so we got blood work done, and sure enough, thyroid numbers across the board were out of range. And so seemed like everything had evened out with prescription medication. And then a couple months later, his hair still started falling out. And this time it presented in like the circles of like alopecia.
Okay.
And so that progressed for a while until he was completely bald. Like he lost all of his eyebrows, didn't have any eyelashes, and he never had body hair. And my husband and I often think, did he ever? And so, he could have already been born with things that we just weren't aware of.
Right.
And so then by the time before 2 months before he turned 4 is when the type 1 diabetes hit. And that was devastating. That was like, because you took a child that could have potentially lived by himself, with just Down syndrome. And then you could have a child with type 1 live by themselves independently with type 1. But now you have Down syndrome and type 1, and you're like,
right.
Yes. But as much as we want to bash technology, sometimes it has come a really long way, and they're almost to an artificial pancreas. There's technology coming out within the next couple of years it's impressive stuff. And so it doesn't mean that we don't keep trying to take it, to heal the body. But as far as I guess you could say a nuisance that type 1 is, it's become a lot more manageable.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And when technology can help, let's let it help.
Yeah, absolutely. And it affords us this conversation right now. I don't know. I'm more of I'm going to find myself in the middle instead of the fear on both ends. So I don't know. That's me. But and as this went, I kept searching for information to be able to take this away, and all of these things to take him away, and ultimately he never stopped being happy, and that could be, what people say about people with Down syndrome. Oh, they're always just so happy. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, he has an attitude a lot of times and he gets mad and angry, especially at his sisters. It's like he doesn't know any different, and he just chooses to just keep going. So, but it's, me, a mom, I'm like, well, this isn't normal. We got to take it away.
Yes. Yeah, no, we have that drive to want to heal our children, which I think is natural and good. And I will say we can take it to extremes and I get it. I had to dial back a few things over the years.
Guilty.
Yeah. Yes. However, I think on some level, we are teaching and modeling that this is a journey, and it's always worth looking for new answers. And
couldn't have said it better. Absolutely.
Yeah. As well as appreciating the present moment, which it sounds like your family really does.
That's been a work in progress too. Yeah. Because I think that when you have a child that isn't well, you kind of live in the past a little bit, and you are in, anytime you would get sick or something, you kind of carry some of that with you. And so it's like, how do I stop doing that? Because ultimately you land in a place of it is what it is. And that has been something that, I would say that is a work in progress for our family, but it serves nobody to, constantly live in fear or the what ifs. So
Nicole, I think that's a really good point, because that can be the shadow side of being a continuous solution seeker, is that we feel like when someone is sick, when someone is having a hard time, us or our children, we can feel like, oh, well, I did something wrong. Right. Yeah, and sometimes, to your point, it just is what it is. And just because someone's sick or unwell or having a hard time doesn't mean we messed up. It just is.
It just is. Yes. And that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes.
Yeah.
But you are right. I would imagine you're the same way, the solution seeker. And sometimes the solution is not there.
Yes.
It's frustrating. But
yes. However, sometimes it can lead to things. So on your journey,
keep going.
Yes. Keep going towards how you ended up where you are.
Yeah. I mean, we just kept looking, and honestly, it was like one day, so I guess somebody that I followed on Instagram had shared something from Carrie Bennett. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is the most sensical thing I have heard in years. And, I grew up traveling along the Chesapeake Bay and really just loved being outside, and we love hiking and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. We all feel better when we're outside. And so, I followed along with her for a little bit. And then finally, probably about a year ago or so, I just reached out, because sometimes people won't work with a kid with Down syndrome. And I think they just see it as complex. It's complex, especially when you're carrying some baggage of, 3 autoimmune diseases with you. So she's like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And by that time that I had started working with her, we had already started to put a lot of those, I just wish people understood these simple changes in place.
So what were some of the simple changes that you started with? So you have a child, he's unwell, multiple autoimmune, you come across information that's like, actually, maybe if you spend more time outside, that could be healing to this situation. Okay. Next. So then what'd you do?
So I just started myself, always under the impression you can't force kids to do anything. And if they find it worthy, they will join in. And so I just started going out at sunrise. And then next thing you know, they're out there with me and, we're doing like our little jumps and stuff like that. And then came, me buying some of those red lights. I had seen somebody recommend, red reptile lights. And I was like, well, we'll see how it goes. It was an adjustment to begin with, but I didn't quite understand all of the finite details of all the benefits of blocking blue light until obviously just, pretty recently. And then, so we started blocking blue light, got like the red glasses and then yellow glasses for any screen time. Although I will say I'm probably an extreme. We don't have any real technology. Like we have a laptop and a TV and that's it. Like we don't have like iPads or tablets or anything like that. I probably sound like a crazy person in 2023 for saying that. But that's honestly where we started with it. And it just has seemed to kind of keep rolling and gain some speed from there. So.
And did you notice with the children, as they spent more time outside and you changed the lighting environment in the evening, did you notice changes with the children?
100%. And it happens pretty quick. They are tired at the appropriate time and they go to bed and they are ready for bed at the appropriate time. They're not like running around like crazy kids. Mm-hmm. They go to sleep, they sleep well, and then they wake at an appropriate time. And that's a question too that has to be asked is, should preteens, teenagers really be sleeping until midday? That if my circadian rhythm is what it should be, I should be awake at these hours and asleep at these hours. And I think that holds true for kids. I will stand by that for sure. Do you see that with your kids?
I do, but they don't. They're not on board. So they sleep.
Gotcha.
Sleep right through. However, during this school year, we're on top of it. But yeah, they've reached an age where, it's a little
they know a lot.
A little out of my hands.
I totally get that.
Yeah, but I agree. I mean, I think ideally all humans would be in a better health state if we lived by light and dark, the natural light and dark cycles across ages.
Absolutely.
And it's just, the technology and socializing that gets in the way of that. I don't think it has anything to do with, anything else.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you just accept it for what it is and where they are. And again, it is what it is, they have their own little minds too.
Yeah. And they all wear the blue blockers. We have a big basket of them. Yeah. Oh yeah. And their friends come over and they're like, what is that? I'm like, just put them on. My mom will make us.
I love that. That's awesome.
So they're all there.
But it's planting those seeds. One day they'll take it and it'll make sense to them one day. And it's like I tell people all the time, do you not want to sleep better? Like what is wrong with sleeping better? Like that's like the most important thing that we do. As we spend most of our life, when you're a little kid and you have to make them nap, they spend most of their life fighting a nap. But it's like, man, as an adult, I could really sleep right now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. It's like we say we want all these things and it's like, okay, well, here's how to get them. It's like, oh, that seems really hard. All right. But I mean, but I will say it's only hard at first, to your point, right? Like there's adjustment periods. And then once you get used to it, it's just kind of, you don't really have to think about it, right? Like it's not like a continuous struggle.
No, I think it just becomes your lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if someone turns on a light at night in our house, everyone is like, oh my gosh, that's so bright.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing what we were used to, right? Yeah. Like when my Iris software ticks off for a minute and my computer's rebooting and it goes back to factory settings. I'm like, what
is that?
It's like, even in the middle of the day, I'm like, I can't believe I was blasting my face with that for so many years. Like this is crazy.
And well into
crazy.
The night. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And it's interesting because I just did, interviewed circadian research, one of the original circadian researchers. And so they're like all of the science behind the importance of circadian rhythms and how dysregulated circadian rhythms lead to poor health outcomes like cancer, like that was all there in 2001, they had all this research, right? But it was all done on shift workers. And I think people were like, well, if you're not a shift worker, we don't need to tell you about this. And it's like, okay, but if you're in front of a laptop on factory settings at 10 o'clock at night or 12 o'clock at night or scrolling through your phone at 1 a.m, you're a shift worker.
Wow. That's a really good point. I never thought of it that is like shift work.
Yeah, because what they were measuring was the light environment, right? So if you're putting yourself in a brightly lit environment when it's dark outside, then all of that research applies to you too.
Yeah, for sure. Like think about, I always often think about what it was like before I started this. It's like lights on first thing in the morning. I'm going to go get a shower and I'm going to just blast myself with light from the time I wake up. And it's not even like it's a balanced or filtered light, like obviously the sun. It's just like when you step outside the box and you're looking in, you're like, yeah, that's pretty unnatural. And that's, and that's, and people wonder, I don't know why I'm so tired all day or why this is happening in my body. And it's like, just a simple change can really just kind of create a little bit more or a move back towards homeostasis, just that kind of like your body saying, oh, thank you. I don't have to work as hard now. Or, it's just crazy.
Yes.
It's crazy.
It's like we have so many stressors on our bodies and on ourselves, right? So any relief that we can give ourselves, and
absolutely
going outside is such a huge part of that. Okay. So you bring your son to work with Carrie Bennett. And I'm really interested in this because the way that I heard you frame it was that you started to see his symptoms and his conditions as mitochondrial dysfunction.
Absolutely. And I don't think it would be extreme to say that people with Down syndrome, I've said it before, have really poor mitochondrial function. And I think that's just because of the Down syndrome, just that extra copy. I think it's just that, their bodies are really working in a deficit. And I'm under the impression, Carrie feels the same way, that there is no reason why we couldn't get it to function typically. Things have to be a little more strict and I guess maybe probably seen as extreme. Right. And, the prescription's always the same, but this has to be a little bit more fine-tuned and just, you have to stay consistent with it. Right. And, which is the human responsibility piece of it that is often kind of difficult, that personal responsibility.
Yes.
But it is what it is. And, so what we really started doing, we kept up circadian rhythm. And then we kind of figured that they are at an infrared light deficiency. And as we know, that infrared light, especially that morning light, is really what's going to help with that mitochondrial function as well. And so we introduced red light therapy. And honestly, the red light therapy, because one of my main concerns that I brought to Carrie was the idea of people with Down syndrome are really kind of predisposed, I guess you could say, to an Alzheimer's dementia type illness or disease. And knowing what what we know now, light, blue light into the eye, like all of that. It's just, it's insanely all connected. And so the idea of using red light on we used it on his head, and the idea was we just really wanted to regrow hair. But with the increased red light, we saw more cognitive more cognitive abilities, more spontaneous communication, joking, and just it seemed like an overall, I guess you could say, fog was lifted for him.
Wow.
It was like that extra red light was able to kind of give just that on that mitochondrial level, that biophysical level, it was able to give him what he needed. And it just kept kind of going. And we introduced some molecular hydrogen, which interestingly here, I think one of our greatest discussions was in people with Down syndrome have kind of like that wonky immune system where it seems to kind of upregulate on certain sides. And I had done some looking into an interferon response, like working with the cytokines and stuff. And it just seemed to always upregulate a side of their immune system. And she looks and she's like, well, you know what clears that, right? And ultraviolet light. And so
wow,
it's like one of those moments you're like, oh my gosh, we've been, you beat your head against the wall for years thinking I have to maintain the status quo. And we have a simple solution by going outside. And it's just so crazy how things have kind of just connected.
That's
connected. It's
so
just incredible. It is.
Okay. So could you just that one piece then explain sort of in your words, what is happening with the UV light, with the immune system, what sort of like Carrie explained to you? Explain it to us.
It'll definitely be in my words.
Yes, please do. That's the point of this podcast.
So, the immune system, that was the T1 and the T2 part of the immune system, and, they kind of like to be in balance with each other. Well, I think what you're seeing in people with Down syndrome is you're seeing one of those parts, or the adaptive and the, I can't think of the other part of the immune system. Oh my gosh. One of those always seems to be activated. And so it's always telling a person with Down syndrome, it's telling them, oh my gosh, fight, fight, fight. There's an invader. We got to go after something, when there's probably nothing wrong, but it's constantly activating, constantly, burning through all antioxidants and everything. And so by going outside, it helps to clear that response and bring back that homeostasis within those parts of the immune system. So hopefully that helped.
And it's the UV light that's doing that.
It's the UV light that helps with that. And I think we've also found that molecular hydrogen plays a piece in that too, because it is that selective anti-inflammatory as well. So it's often, I think people want to say, oh, what's the one thing that you have changed? I don't think we can ever look at it at that, because we've added in some really amazing things that are affordable and easily accessible.
Yes.
Yeah. Stepping outside at, what time does UV light appear now? Like 10, between 8 and 10 now or something. If I just get out there for 20 minutes a day, and it's not a big ask, but something so simple can have such dramatic results. So.
Yes.
That's where that's where we are.
And that's a great point. There's a whole spectrum of things. And we talk a lot about the light because it's so often ignored, right? And it's such a key piece. But yes, there are lots of other pieces as well. And so, so for somebody who's listening who's like, all right, so you're telling me that if I take my child or my child with Down syndrome and I stick them outside in like a bathing suit, weather permitting, to get that UV light, am I not then adding a cancer risk?
Well,
right? That's where everyone's mind goes. We've all been trained to be like, we go in the sun,
you die immediately.
We're going to get cancer.
Yeah. So I think obviously there is nuance to that. He has always loved being outside, and that was confirmed I didn't need confirmation from it. Obviously that was something I could have observed. But when we had that chat with Dr. Jay Montgomery and talking about how people with Down syndrome truly love to be outside, and I'll discuss that later, but obviously that red morning light, that UVA light, that has to start first. And you have to build up, obviously, that sun callus in order to be able to withstand time out in that UV light.
Tell us what a solar callus is.
It's the way of conditioning your skin to receive more powerful light. I see it as an internal, I guess you could say, sunscreen. It's that way of protecting your body so that you don't burn. But obviously there's nuance with that then, because, people are like, okay, I got my red light, and it takes a little bit of time to develop. I find that it's easier to start this in the spring when UV light makes its return. We've just had a winter and very low UV light. And so spring, so getting out, getting as much skin exposed as you can, and then gradually increasing that time in the brighter light of the day, in midday. And so that really helps to not burn. And I have to say it works. Like only one of our kids is fair skinned, and she works hard, man. She gets out there, and in the morning she'll take walks up and down in like a spaghetti tank top, and she hasn't burnt this whole year.
Wow.
This whole summer. It takes a little, it takes time, and it takes effort. So,
and I think that's why what you're doing, with your work and with your podcast with Tina Matthews, where you're trying to just like lay this out for families in an easy to understand way, is so important, right? Because it's
absolutely,
like, we just got told the sun will give you cancer, end of story, right? But actually, right, there's so much more going on, and there isn't even any UV light and first thing in the morning. So you don't even need to think about that.
Right.
And then that light, helps your skin understand that other types of light are coming. So when we go out in that light, it's not a shock to the system, right? It's like, if you go from Minnesota to Acapulco in February and lie out at noon, first day, like, your body's going to respond badly. But if you, again, like
prepare,
and put your body in the natural environment where you live or where you happen to be at all the times of day where there's light, it's a very, very different situation than what we've been taught to do. Like,
it is
SPF 50 every second you're outside, right? Like,
exactly. Put on everything. No sun on the skin. And you're like, wait a minute, this thing has risen and set for more than I could even imagine. And we're afraid.
And we all evolved under it, right? Like Dr. Twyman has a great line. He's like, if the sun was bad for us, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
We would all be dead.
Exactly. Yeah. In a matter of, I don't even know, like days. Yeah, for sure.
For the entire history of human evolution up to 30 seconds ago, we basically lived outside.
And if the sun doesn't rise, we're
all
in
day
trouble.
long.
Yeah, we're in trouble. We're calling each other. It's time. Prepare. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. But you just have to get out there in the morning, man. The naked eyes and as much skin. And I think that's one of the biggest things too. And Tina and I have alluded to that on our podcast, is that you have to take off your sunglasses, but you can't just take them off and expect everything to be okay. Because if you have obviously shielded your eyes from sunlight for years, it's the same thing. Like you said, I can't be, up in like Canada and go to, I don't know, Cancun in February, January, and expect not to burn. Yeah, that's going to hurt your eyes. It's like, we can have some common sense to this and understanding that things can't be instantaneous all the time. So,
yes. And it's incremental changes. And if it feels bad, then don't do it. Right. Like if it feels like I taught my children that we did go on a vacation to Mexico. We were living in like a kind of a cold place. And I made them get up and watch the sunrise. And then during the day, I was like, when you feel like you're going to burn, go in the shade.
That's
and they
exactly
did.
it.
Like that. They were like, okay. And it totally, like, that made sense to them.
That's exactly, that's it. It's I should probably listen to what my body is telling me right now. Like it feels like it's burning. So maybe I should seek shelter or, put a shirt on or something, and that's what we had to do with my child that's really fair skinned. And she knows, and she just turned 10, and she knows how her skin feels when it's reached that limit. And she'll ask for like a swim shirt, if we're spending the day at the pool or just at the beach or something. Like they know they it's not difficult. You just have to choose. You have to choose to do it. So
yes. I interviewed Dr. Alexander Wunsch once, who's like a very prominent chronobiologist. What he calls it, he sort of studies the sun and all of these impacts of it. And I was telling him about that Mexico trip, and he was like, "Yeah, well, we used to just know this, right? Like this used to be sort of legacy." Wisdom that was passed down, and depending what part of the world you lived in and what type of skin you had, you just knew what to do.
Yeah. It's like,
and
how
really
do you forget that?
We've cut ourselves off from that, and like we live in these isolated chambers, and it's just like get fed, certain pieces of information, but not all the information. We only have like some information, but
just
not enough
information.
Yeah.
No, it is crazy. Like, that ancestral like wisdom, or, I always go back to like the frontier. And we have a really cool place where I live where you can kind of go and see. And it was like the frontier of this area. And I go back and I think about what their life would have been like then. And they worked when they got up, and they probably didn't when the sun was really hot. They just, I was very hot and my skin was on fire. So I'm going to go do some stuff somewhere else in the shade. Yeah. And it's like, oh, that makes sense. Or the flip side, now we have people that never experience any season. You think I get up, I get in my car, which is in a garage, and I maybe walk into work and I work inside all day. And then by the time I leave, it's almost dark and I haven't seen or felt any seasonal change whatsoever. And that's something that's like a little 1% change too, to just start feeling the weather,
start to engage with the natural environment and what that temperature is. And even when it's really cold or really rainy, like it's still like being outside, it just feels different. Our whole system is responding differently. We're on a cellular level, like our bodies know when we're out in the elements and we need it.
This feels good. Yeah. My mind feels better.
My walks are shorter on the crappy days. I'm not going to lie, but like just being outside even briefly.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that completely. You just got to do it. It's a non-negotiable to be outside every day for, I don't know, start with 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. Just, you have
whatever.
to. Yeah.
Whatever you can do.
Absolutely.
So I find it really interesting because you followed your own research journey. You started out where it was like, okay, the medical establishment was like, here's what you're dealing with and here's what's going to happen. And that's kind of it. And you and your husband, being who you are, chose to sort of push on those boundaries a little bit and figure out what is possible. And now you've landed in a place where it's like, okay, I can look at what's going on with my child or with all of my children, but particularly my child with Down syndrome as a mitochondrial dysfunction situation as opposed to a life sentence.
Absolutely. Perfect way to put it. It's saying that I have, or we have, a hand in his health. And we're not going to just throw our hands up. And like you said, it's not a life sentence because he has a beautiful life. And we're just choosing to interact with nature and use that to bring about health. And that it gives you a little more hope. And I think that's what, when you have a child with a cognitive disability, it's a different mentality. Because they can't always communicate everything with you. Mm-hmm. When he's not feeling well, I can't get to specifically what is not well. unless I go through this whole series of questions. My girls are like, oh my gosh, this spot hurts when I touch it. Like
I have a sore throat in the back on this side, halfway down. Yeah.
Have you tried drinking water today? No. Yeah. For him, it's like everything is fine all the time. And
right.
when it's probably not, but it's kind of realizing that how can I use this beautiful world that we've been given and we're made to interact with? How can I use it to bring health to him? And I think that's been the overarching question. And I appreciate that Carrie has responded to that question and has given so many more beautiful and hopeful suggestions than anyone ever has, and to which has led to our own little journey in our family. So there needs to be more people that are asking questions like, well, why is a person with Down syndrome subject to Alzheimer's disease? Why? Let's ask the why. Is it because they've received, the Well Child Starter pack of stuff and, lots of metals are in the brain? Is it because they are super sensitive to our modern world? Probably all of it. It's we can't stop asking these questions because people with disabilities deserve this light as well. So
yes. Absolutely.
That's where I find it. It's a tough crowd that people with families with Down syndrome. It's a tough community to get into because I think a lot of people tend to feel sorry for people with a disability. Yeah. And sure, lots of things are crappy, but I don't know. We always made the decision when he was young that we were never going to treat him any differently than any of our other children. And that comes with, I don't feel sorry for him.
Yeah. Great.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. And he probably doesn't either. He doesn't. Like, he doesn't. This is me. I don't know anything else.
Why would you feel sorry for me? Yeah. So, if any of my other children had these issues, I would certainly be seeking information as well. Yeah. So that,
it's amazing. And so, Carrie Bennett, she is, on the faculty, at the Institute of Applied Quantum Biology, the certification that we have, and she teaches there, and she also has private practice, and she looks at everything through the lens of quantum biology, right? So she was able to see this child in a different dimension than anyone else you had brought him to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely was. And she was able to just kind of take and look at him, and I guess I would say look at him as not only, who he is, but coupled with Down syndrome. Whereas other people are just looking at just almost like through the lens of a typical child. And it's not, you can't, because people with Down syndrome, and I'm going to guess any other spectrum disorder, it's not the same. Things just aren't the same. It's almost, it's chaotic on the inside. And I think that was a goal that we kind of figured out, was we just have to figure out how we can bring it all together, and addressing it with the red light and red light therapy. And, we have to be mindful of artificial blue light, and we have to be mindful of Wi-Fi, because it's all super dehydrating. And that's another aspect of people with Down syndrome, is they're constantly in a dehydrated state, and, not go. And I don't know if it's the Down syndrome that does it, or if it's like the blue light and the Wi-Fi that does it. I just think they're just so sensitive.
Right.
It is incredible.
So these things are affecting all of us all of the time, but for somebody with Down syndrome, it's like times 100. Like, it's whatever effect we're feeling, they're feeling it even more.
Absolutely. And they just don't know how to communicate that.
And then they can't express it.
And so he might feel, and I would imagine maybe the reason why he feels more comfortable outside is maybe he feels a certain energy or something inside. because electricity, you could say, or, we're in the process now of grounding our internet. And maybe he feels that and just doesn't know.
Yeah. It doesn't have the words. I met a woman once at a quantum health event who was so sensitive that they moved to the country, like they rewired their house, but she would walk through the kitchen and she was like, I can't walk through that place in the kitchen. And her husband was like, honey, I just did the whole house. Like there's nothing there. She's like, I just can't walk in that part of the kitchen. I can't do it. Like I can feel it. So he went under the house and he dug around, and there was a cable. There was some wire there from the previous owners, and it was giving off something. And this woman, and it was a disability, right? Like they really had to live in the middle of nowhere because she just couldn't even interact with civilization. She was so sensitive, right? But she had the words, right? Yeah. Like she was able to say like, that part of the kitchen is it makes me hurt.
Yeah, it makes me hurt. Yeah. Something's not right.
So I wonder if there's like, now that I know that level of sensitivity is possible, I wouldn't have thought it was possible if I hadn't actually spoken to this person and she was like, yes, this is what happened. I'm like, oh my God.
That's incredible. Yeah. I would never have.
Yeah.
That's a whole other level. Yeah, for sure. But I just think, we're obviously electric beings and we're constantly emitting and receiving. And it's like, how sensitive are some people? And like, what happens if we make those little changes and something like as artificial blue light. And when we had that talk with Dr. Jay Montgomery, and that was his number one thing was the blue light for people with Down syndrome, that artificial blue light. And unfortunately, we're at a time where we give technology to kids as a babysitter, and it happens with people with disabilities too. Like just to occupy time. And it's incredibly damaging. And I didn't understand it until he had said it. It slows down your ability to process light. And then it affects it affects the dopamine in your central nervous system.
Yeah.
And that, that central nervous system is responsible for what? Moving, playing, cognition, like all of the things. And if I have someone that's super sensitive and they're just constantly having something in their face,
wow,
it's incredible.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like, and like I said, obviously we all have choices that we can make. And so if you know this information, you might as well do something about it.
Yeah.
Because
yeah. And if you're like, listen, my kid needs some screen time, like it's just the only way I can function. Like just get them some yellow glasses for the daytime and some blue blockers at, there are lots of ways.
Absolutely.
To work around it once we have an awareness of what's going on.
Yeah. We just can't ignore some of these issues now with our young kids. Like you can't ignore it anymore. And I think that's one of the goals with Tina and I is to be able to say that you can live, we can live in this world, but it might take spending maybe $20, for a little blue blocker, because we can't deny that. Yeah. Every day my husband and I take a walk, and our kids, that's their screen time when we take a walk. We have kids old enough to be able to do that now, but we can make changes. You just have to want to. I think that's the biggest takeaway. And I knew that when I kind of started with the family approach, because parents have to be willing to change themselves, and I'm a much better mother when I'm well rested. And again, who doesn't want to sleep better? And, I'm much better in that respect. And therefore they're going to see that. So I think that's the biggest takeaway. Like parents have to be willing to change too. So.
Yes. And all of these habits that we're talking about are good for everybody. Yeah. Like just to circadian regulate a family, just that one thing can change so much, but it does require, changing how we live. Like my kids are like, you guys go to bed so early. Like,
I'm tired.
Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Right, yeah, one day you will too. Yeah. It's children, man. Yeah. They're their own little, but they're their own little people is what they are. Yeah. Yeah. And it would be like, I don't have like our kids are homeschooled. So some of this stuff might seem like it's easy for us to do, but, it is doable. Like you said, $20 on a pair of yellow blue blockers. You can do that on your way to school, crack the windows. As soon as they get home, maybe don't make them do their homework right away. Maybe make them go outside.
Yeah. Run around outside. Yeah. Anything that can be outside. Yeah. And that's a good point. Like opening the sunroof in the car, opening the windows in the car, opening the windows in the kitchen while you're making breakfast. I mean, even in the winter, like a crack it, all of these things. All these things help. Walking the dog first thing.
Yep, absolutely.
Like a great one. Okay, so let's just to wrap this up. So you started to approach. What's your son's name? I didn't.
Will.
Okay. So Will starts to spend more time outside. He's doing red light therapy every day. You're blocking blue light at night. So what are the changes that you've seen in Will over the last year since you started doing that?
Well, again, I will say the kid, one of the biggest changes, and we had pulled him from school, and that probably is what made the biggest change. I know not everybody has that, but we were then able to kind of really start to roll with some of this. And so he now wakes up right around sunrise. He likes to walk with my husband. I would take the dog for just a little walk. He likes to do that. And no joke, he is on the move from sunrise to sunset. Like he is very much like that of a typical teenager. You know, like boys should be active for the majority of the day. Yeah. Like girls too, but boys should be doing like busy work. Personally. So his activity level is very typical of what it should be. He has a trike that he likes to ride. And so he kind of like terrorizes the neighborhood, and he likes to go pick up, random sticks that fall down. He likes to pick up big chunks of wood if somebody gets a tree cut down. So he likes to do that. But like I said before, cognition changes, understanding a lot of what we're saying, and we don't have to like break things down as much. Like a fog was lifted. He likes to spontaneously make jokes, and they're funny. And he's able to kind of communicate a little bit better. And I would say hand-eye coordination. Like he's pretty good at golf. And golf and baseball, like those are his two favorite, and basketball's in there, but golf is his thing. But being able to just make consistent contact with that ball, and it goes where it should. Like he just had his first even par the other day on a hole. Like it was my husband said it's a tough par 3, and he parred it.
He did it.
Yeah, he did it. And
wow.
He's done that kind of sometimes, but this was like first legit from, I don't know if he played the Reds or not, like the closer tees. But yeah, so that kind of stuff. And then we're getting some hair on his head. If you look in the sunlight, you can see these little hairs. He has eyebrows, starting to grow eyebrows. He's consistently held on to eyelashes. And one of the coolest things is he now has those little hairs on his arms. And we had never seen that before. So he has little hairs on his arms. And I have no expectation on anything that's, going to happen or the timeline of it all. But I'm pretty impressed with what we've had.
Those are big changes.
Yeah.
And what's his sort of sickness level like? Is he getting sick as often, or?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay.
Let's just say that if he does, he is able to clear it a lot quicker.
Okay.
And not hang on to something.
Okay.
So I take that as as a win.
That's a huge win. It's been what you said, like about a year?
About that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not that long, really. I mean, we were talking yesterday, someone on one of the coaching calls about a case where, a woman had been doing shift work in a hospital like for decades, right? And she's been doing all the things to get her sleep back on track, and it's still not quite there. And it's like, our mitochondria, like they can bounce back, but who knows, who knows how long, and the journey is a winding road.
It is. Yeah. And who are we to put an expectation on the body?
Yeah.
And when we want it to heal and make changes, because maybe it has other work to do before it can finally get to something else. Because if you've done shift work for years, gosh, it
can take years.
Yeah.
And I mean, even with, I had chronic fatigue, and even that, it was like, you could set your circadian rhythms quite quickly, right? Like,
oh yeah.
But the underlying, full repair, I mean, who knows, right? Like that is an ongoing. And so, progress, not perfection.
Consistency in that progress. Yeah, for sure. And it's easy to say, but to just kind of give some gratitude to the body too for what it's doing.
That's such a good point.
Thank you. That's such a different thing to talk about with someone, oh, I hate when I get a cold, or I hate when I feel like this. Well, it's like, thank you. You gave me an appropriate response because the body felt like something wasn't right, and now it's going to make it right. And it's just such a different thought. It's a different thought. And some people just aren't ready for that conversation, but I don't think the body ever makes mistakes personally. It just does what it does to keep you here.
Yeah.
That's
it's working off an intelligence, I think, that we haven't even begun to grasp.
No.
And what a beautiful point. And I love that we're wrapping up on that, is to appreciate that. And it's like, our bodies are not a machine, or we can yell at it for breaking down, right? Like, something's going on and our bodies are dealing with it.
It's like, I'm telling you what's going on. You have to listen to me at some point, right? Like, no, be quiet. Just ignore me. It'll be fine. Yeah. It's like, we have to do something. Yeah. The status quo is no longer okay.
Yeah. And our bodies are telling us, and it's like, we can make all of the changes about what environment we put our body in, but I love this point. Like, we also need to probably make a change about how we're thinking about our body, because on a quantum level, it's all having
an effect. That's a whole other podcast.
It's all having an effect.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. It is.
We think how if we talk to someone and be like, oh God, I can't, like, seriously, you did that again? What? Right? Like, that person's going to feel differently than if we're like, hey, thanks for letting me know, like, what's going on? Like, what can I help? How can I help? Right? Like, our bodies are listening.
Yep. Like, treat it more like a friend than attack than your enemy. It's here. Like, we get this, like, this is an amazing opportunity to have to live at this time. And, I don't know. I just think that the more we connect back, things start to make sense. At least to us in this space.
Yes,
I think.
Absolutely.
To other people, we might sound like, oh my gosh. But that's okay.
We won't worry about them.
Nope,
they're listening to some other podcast.
Right. Exactly.
Nicole, thank you so much for sharing your story and telling us about Will. And he, what a treasure he is. He's brought such a gift to the world, really. Absolutely. Because now you are certified in applied quantum biology. You are bringing this information to other families. So his little soul has started a ripple effect.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah. Thank you so much.
pleasure. And just quickly tell people where to find you, your website, your podcast, all that, your socials, all that stuff. We'll put it in the show notes as well, but
okay.
Just to have.
I just run an Instagram account at this time. It's Circadian Family Wellness. Working on a website hopefully here soon. And then my friend Tina Matthews and I, we run Modern Circadian Moms, and that's also on Instagram and also our podcast on Apple and Spotify.
Fantastic. So thank you for doing what you do. It was such a pleasure to chat.
Yes, thank you so much.
This has been the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. To find a practitioner who practices from this point of view, visit our directory at quantumbiologycollective.org. If you are a practitioner, definitely take a look at the Applied Quantum Biology Certification, a 6-week study of the science of the new human health paradigm and its practical application with your patients and clients. We also love to feature graduates of the program on this very podcast. Until next time, the QBC.